Darkcast Network, indie pods with a dark side. Hello and welcome back to Fuck That. This week I have a very different format for an episode, one that I haven't done before. This week I have a guest on by the name of Anastasia, who I came across on TikTok, and she had an incredible and really heartbreaking story. So I wanted to bring her on to the podcast to share her message. So I am letting her completely take the reins this week and tell her story. Trigger warning, there is going to be discussion of a lot of really, really awful domestic violence, sexual assault, and there is sexual assault towards children, so please listen with care. Anastasia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. So my name is Anastasia. I have a platform on TikTok, toxiclove_2022, where I am actively trying to get my story out to the world of TikTok. My story of survival from a monster named Ronald Lee Hopkins, who is still walking free right now, looking for other victims. I met Ronald in 2014 when I joined a dating app called Plenty of Fish. People are pretty familiar with that one. Not good results, but I met him on there, and we, after talking for just a day or two, we decided to meet in person as to not waste each other's time in case there was no chemistry. We did meet. It was only for a couple of minutes. He was running late. He said he was working, and I had to get my kids. So we met up at a local Dunkin' Donuts where I felt safe because that's where the police all hang out. And we immediately clicked. I think I was attracted to him, and he was super confident and just seemed like he had a good head on his shoulders. But we did not, like I said, I didn't meet long with him. I had to get my kiddos. So we started just texting more. And then after a few nights, he and I went on a date, and he spent the night and never left. Everything started to move very quickly. He basically loved bombed me. So he's what I would say is a narcissist, and just swept me off my feet. I fell for him very quickly. And within 2 months, he had asked me to marry him, and I said yes. There were red flags in the beginning that I just kind of painted green because I really liked him. The first red flag would be he was served a no contact order at my apartment from his ex-wife. And he explained that all the way, but I took it to my friend and kind of just talked it over with her because, I didn't feel comfortable. He said he was upset that I had brought it to my friend and said that I was talking trash about him and no longer wanted me to talk to that friend. And so this was the start of being isolated. At that point, though, I noticed the red flags and was like, okay, I want to take a break. Something's not right here. And I asked him to leave, and he refused to leave my apartment. So I started packing his stuff and putting it in the back of his truck, and he called the police. The police said that I was not allowed to kick him out because he had been receiving mail there, unbeknownst to me. I did not know that he was doing that, and that the law within New Hampshire was he didn't have to leave. So they told me to go upstairs, and he stayed downstairs. And I just remember thinking, I don't really know what to do at this point. But before the night was over, we had made up. He had said all the right things and got me back to believing things were going to be okay. He convinced me that it was just his wife being bitter and crazy. And so the next thing, we moved to a bigger apartment. That was kind of the next step. The first night there, we got into another argument. I can't remember at this moment what it was about, but I asked to take a break again. And he was upset. He approached me claiming that he wanted the ring off my finger, but he backed me into a chair, and that chair smashed against the window and broke it. I just told him, I kind of panicked. I was like, please get out. I don't want to be with you. He's like, okay, well, I used to be a police officer. I know how this works. I'm going to call the cops. You're going to go to jail. So he called the cops, and I just stood there in like disbelief, not knowing what to do. And he was on the phone saying, my girlfriend is drunk. She's being belligerent. She's hitting me. Please, come arrest her, basically. While we were waiting for the police, he took my printer and my TV, threw it down the stairs, and then across the street into the river. When the police showed up, they questioned me. They recorded me. And I told them exactly what happened. And I also mentioned that he had taken my phone. They went and spoke with him, and he was standing in the bathroom at this point, and I could hear them talking, and he denied taking my phone, and the police officer asked if he could look, and sure enough, it was hidden behind the toilet in the bathroom. And they also found either the printer or the TV. So they arrested him for domestic violence. And so it really backfired on him. But I was already just completely attached to him, like in love with him. And so as he was headed to the police station, I texted him and was like, why would you do that? That's crazy. The police officer got a hold of that and called me and said, you guys aren't allowed together. Do not call again or I'll arrest you. And so, I at that point was like, oh, this is over. And like, I'm feeling just extremely overwhelmed and upset. I don't want him to be out of my life. I just wanted him to calm down. The next thing I know, that next morning he calls me and apologizes, says that he won't ever do it again, and that he's just upset because, his kids drank the Kool-Aid is what he said, because his kids were older. They drank their mom's Kool-Aid and they're against him. And so he said all the right things and convinced me to move, to uproot my life. I had a nice job. I had custody of my kids, or, they were living with me. The courts weren't involved yet. But he convinced me to move with him to Maine and stay with his cousin so that we could be together, that was not my finest moment, but I wasn't thinking clearly at that point. I was being extremely manipulated by this man. And not to mention he was 14 years older than me. And I think that played a part in it, me being naive and just young. So I did. I moved with him and stayed with his cousin in Winslow, Maine. And that's when I started seeing some behavioral stuff, like mentally like behavioral stuff with him. He was very high. His moods were very high, and then he just kind of dropped. And there was a point while we were staying there, he's looking for jobs and getting discouraged, and I think that played a part in it. But there was a point where he wouldn't get out of bed and was like, I don't want to be with you. I want you to leave. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll leave. And I went and stayed with my dad, who I just met a few months before meeting this man. And he immediately wanted me to come back. But my head was just swimming. I couldn't, decipher up from down at that point. I was like, I'm just going to stay with my dad, clear my head. And the whole time my dad's in my ear chirping about how I was in the wrong and that I should, make up. And so I remember he called me and said, I found a job. I found an apartment. We can move to Waterville, start over fresh. And he said all the right things again and convinced me. And so next thing I know, we're living in an apartment in Waterville, Maine. Things, we were settling in. I had my kids at that point. But I had mediation coming up because when I moved, I also filed for custody. And I remember it being like a Friday. We got into, and he was upset with me. We got into an argument. I tried to stand up for myself and he knocked me to the floor. And that was the beginning of a very violent relationship. He told me to get up, follow him to his truck, which I did, what I was told. And I got in the truck and he started backhanding me in both of my eyes. And he did that. He did like 3 rounds of that. And my eyes immediately started swelling. My nose, I'm pretty sure he broke my nose. And, he was just yelling at me the whole time and convincing me that it was my fault. I don't even remember at this moment what it was about. I just remember being convinced that was like, oh yeah, I messed up. It was my fault. You're right. And we got back to the house. He told me, we made up. He told me he loved me. He iced me, put ice on my face. That became a routine where he would have me lay in bed and ice me down. And we acted like everything was fine, I guess. The next morning, I remember him saying, I'm going to work. I marked your tire. Don't leave. I'll know. Don't let the landlord see your eyes. My eyes were black and swollen. And so it actually happened on a Thursday, because that Friday when he went to work, that's when he said everything. And I was supposed to get my kids that day. And I remember having to text their dad and be like, I can't pick them up. So yeah, at this point, I was getting them on the weekends while we were waiting for mediation. That following Monday was mediation. So over the weekend, he got me makeup. I've never worn makeup. I don't know anything about it. I tried to use it. It looked terrible. So I was like, so Monday came around. He took the day off and said, let's go get your makeup professionally done. I remember walking in with him, and I remember how the lady looked at me and how her jaw dropped, but she didn't say a word. She just started doing my makeup, and then he went to the bathroom, and that's when she started whispering, please let me help you. Please let me call the cops. Sorry. I can pretty much get this story out without breaking down. I most of the time feel just numb telling it. I don't know why that got me. But I lied to her and to myself and said, oh, it's fine. This doesn't happen all the time. He's really a good guy. And then he came out of the bathroom and she stopped talking. She finished my makeup and she did a wonderful job. And then we left and we headed right towards mediation. And I remember him saying, very nicely, reminding me, don't touch your makeup, don't cry, just get through it. And at this point, like up until this point, I was like, I'm taking my kids. I'm gonna have my kids during the week, and he can have them on the weekend. Court was not involved. It was just something that my kid's dad and I was discussing. And on the way there, I just came to this realization, like I can't do this. I can't take my kids. I can't put them through. I'm stuck. I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know what to do. And so I decided like I was going to let him have primary of my kids. And he was fine with that. So it worked, it's not like he was going to fight that. So we went in. It all happened quickly. I, took weekends instead. And that was that. So, things started to calm down a little bit. It's just these cycles. We just had these cycles. And something else happened and he hurt me again. And while he was sleeping one night, I was like, hey, and my brother lived down the road. He and I didn't have a real close relationship, but I had visited him a couple times before and was hoping that maybe he would notice and say something, but he never did. But this time he hurt me pretty bad and he was sleeping and I just couldn't be in the apartment. I had to get away from him. So I snuck out as an adult, snuck out of my own apartment and went and visited my brother. And just, I don't know, maybe I thought I was going to be able to tell him, but I couldn't. And so I only stayed for a few minutes and started to panic and was like, I need to head back home before he finds out. And as I'm pulling in, so our driveway, we just pull like along a gate. We park along a fence. And as I'm pulling along that fence, I get smashed in the rear end by he was my boyfriend, my fiance at the time. I don't remember if we were married yet, but he had smashed into me with his truck. So he knew that I left. He followed me. He waited. And then as I was pulling in, he smashed into me. He quickly came up to my door and yanked me out and dragged me up to the house. And that's when he started hitting me with his belt. And told me, I don't know if this was the first time he had told me these things, but basically that I belonged to him. I was not his equal, that I needed to refer to him, like to call him sir, yes sir, no sir. And he whips me with a belt and at some point told me that like anytime he thought I needed my bell rung, that he was going to do those types of things. So I'm feeling pretty hopeless and I can't remember right now if that's the time if that was the incident that made me leave, but I got to the point where I just didn't feel safe and waited for him to go to work in that apartment one time and I left. And I was working at Benton Elementary School, I believe it's called. And I called a DV shelter and they put me in a hotel and I tried to leave him. That was like the first time that I had gone to the DV shelter. I was still texting with him, which don't recommend. If you're going to try to get out of a DV situation, you need to go completely no contact, because he was able to hoover me right back in within a couple days. He showed up at my work. My supervisor saw him and saw that something was wrong and asked me. I was walking out to my car and he was standing in a hoodie by my car waiting for me. And she asked me to come in real quick. And she was trying to get me away from him. And I told them what was going on. And this was while I was still in the DV shelter. And they said, well, we'll transfer you anywhere you need to go. They must have transferred me to Augusta. I do not remember. I have completely blocked this out and I've tried really hard to remember. But they did transfer me. I don't remember where I worked, but I ended up in the Augusta area because while I was trying to leave him, we were still texting. He said all the right things again and said that we would move. I was like, I can't go back to that house. You beat me there. Well, we'll move. We'll find a new place. It'll be a new scenery. We'll start over. And that's what he did. He found a place in Augusta and I moved back in with him in Augusta. It did not get better. It got much worse. We'd have these cycles where he'd just be like, really, like, I now know he was bipolar. He did not tell me that the entire time we were together. And I didn't find out he was diagnosed with it until after I had him removed. But I would see these highs where he would get manic. He'd get super hypersexual. He'd have all these ideas and be super happy. And then he would come down, but he'd have to explode to come down. And I was always on the receiving end of that. So there were several incidents in that home where he pinned me to the floor with a butcher knife. He, at one point, wanted a divorce. He was sick of me and wanted a divorce. And I just felt like that was my shot to get out. I agreed. He brought home divorce papers, but also gave me a letter, and that with all, telling me how he loves me and he's never going to do these things. And at this point, I'd heard it so often that I kind of laughed out loud. Which was very wrong. He got really angry. He ripped up the divorce papers, said that I didn't fill them out right. He threw me to the ground, dumped water all over me, started kicking me in my ribs, and then told me that was the night that I was going to die, and told me to get up and go get in the truck again. And I followed him out, and it was nighttime. I remember there were construction workers working, and something in my brain just told me to run. So I ran as I could. He got in his truck and took off, and I collapsed right next to the construction workers. And I remember they called the police. And I just remember watching him speed off, thinking like, none of this matters. I cannot get out of this. He will stalk me. He will say what he needs to. He is completely isolated me from my friends and my family at this point. He has uprooted me and moved me to a different state. I haven't been able to tell anybody about what I was going through. He controlled all of the finances. He was able to freeze the bank accounts, shut my phone off. I would have nothing if I left. And at this point, I was just starting to die inside. And I was like, I'm just going to go back because there is nothing else. I've already tried to leave once through DV shelter. And so I went back to the house, and then the police showed up, and I was sitting on the steps, and the officer immediately had an attitude with me because I was not forthcoming with what had happened. What's going on, Anastasia? You're beaten up. You're soaking wet. Tell me what happened. And I was like, nothing happened. Because like I said, in my head, it did not matter. And if I did tell on him and he went to jail, I was going to die. And so calling the cops or telling the police was not anywhere near an option for me. So I was just like, nothing, everything's fine. And he's like, well, if you're not going to help yourself, then we can't help you. And they left. They found his information. They walked into my house, found his information on the mail, and was like, we could go arrest him right now. And in my head, I was like, well, there's nothing I can do about that. But I just sat in silence. And so, yeah, they got angry with me for not telling them, and then they left. And then I say, he's texting me, and he asking me if everything's fine. I was like, yep, coast is clear. You can come back home. And I was just so numb at this point. So he came back home, and the apologies started to get less and less. He really didn't apologize too much. He did ice me down because from my neck down, I was covered in bruises. I remember lifting up my shirt and looking at both sides of my ribs, just purple and blue, and already starting to bruise. So yeah, we did that again, and he said all the right things once again. And then next thing I knew, we weren't getting divorced, and we were just moving on with life. But then another incident happened where I did try to leave again. He bought, as like, he always apologized with flowers, and probably from that incident is where the flowers came from. He bought this giant Dunkin' Donut coffee mug. They came out with plastic ones around that time, and he thought they were cool. So he bought one of those, filled it with water, put flowers in it, and used it as a vase, and he thought it was the coolest. We got into an argument one night. He took it and threw it at me. I knew to get away from him because he was getting angrier, but I couldn't escape. I was just like in the corner of the living room, and he tucked this coffee cup and it hit me right in the head. And I bit through my tongue and blacked out for a second, and just like my knees buckled. And I remember like getting up and like blood, like I was bleeding out of my mouth. And I remember looking over at him, and this flash of like fear washed over him. Like he realized he had gone too far. I got myself to the couch and sat down, and he came over and was like, making sure I was okay. And I know that now it was just because he was scared that he'd gone too far and he was going to get in trouble. Like he was worried that he was going to kill me. Not that he gave a shit about me, but, just for his own self-preservation. So he came over and, made sure I was okay. Again, iced me down. And in my head, I was like, I am going to die if I don't do something, because these were happening more often and it was getting worse. And so I think it was the next morning. I don't really remember, but I think it was that incident that I had decided after I went to work, I was going to try to get out again. And I called the DV shelter again. And again, they put me up. And each time they were amazing, but they can't help you if you don't want the help, I guess. Like they can't make you stay away. And but again, I was in contact with him, and that was the worst decision ever, because he would say everything he needed to say, the right things. At this point, he was telling me that he would go to therapy with me. I had even started therapy. I didn't get away from him for long, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. I was in this hotel. I started therapy. The therapist is telling me I need to get away or I'm not going to survive. But he's in my ear constantly telling me, like, it's going to be fine. Let's just move again. We'll start over. I'll go to therapy. We had talked about starting a family. He knew how badly I wanted, when things were good, how badly I wanted to start a family with him. I loved him. I loved this man with every fiber of my being. I put so much love into him and convinced myself that if I just loved him enough, he would stop hurting me. So every time he hurt me, I was just like, I'll love him more. I'll show him how much I love him, and he'll get it. He did not get it, by the way. But he convinced me to move again. And this time we went to Leamington, Maine, and we had our own house. We did start therapy initially, but he didn't like the therapist. So he would get angry with the therapist. I think we went to like 3 different ones, and he would tell them everything he did to me. He would admit it. And in my head, that was like, oh, this is progress. He's healing. Well, like he's admitting these things. He knows they're wrong. I know this means that he wants to change. And the last therapist we went to, he challenged him, and the therapist had to stand up for himself. And he got really angry and slammed, the door and marched out and was like, I'm not going to therapy anymore. That was in that house. I kept going. But things, we had those patterns where things would calm down for a little bit. And they did seem to calm down a lot in that home for a while. And looking back, I realize now it's because he wanted to have kids. So we were married at this point. We got married within 6 months of meeting each other. He had a vasectomy, and he was like, when we lived in this home and things were calmer, we started talking about having a family. He's like, I'll get a vasectomy. We'll have, a couple kids, and we'll start a life together, and things will get better. And, just over here being delusional as I was like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't it get better if we had kids and started a family? And part of that was he had his kids who were grown wanted nothing to do with him. And so this was like his chance to, you know, his second try, basically, to be a better parent, I guess. And he was being a decent person to my kids. Like, he was taking my son to Boy Scouts. He was interacting with my kids. He was playing. We were going on vacations. These were the good times, you know, between all this horrible stuff. It wasn't all just horrible. It wasn't all just bad. There were really good times where I felt like he really loved me. And that's what kept me. And, you know, he was really doing the whole dad thing, stepping up, being a great stepdad, you know, buying kids things, taking them to do things. We were going camping. We were going on vacations. He was really close with my daughter, who was 7 at the time in that house. He would take her on trips with him, and she would like to go to do those things. And he was still able to mask when I had my kids. It was when my kids weren't with me that it got really bad. And I remember we got pregnant, and he was so excited about that. And I remember thinking, like, things are going to be great because nobody beats somebody who's pregnant. He's not going to want to hurt his child. This was just me. I was very naive and just thinking I could fix him. And it did not work out that way. He just changed how he hurt me. He would hit me really hard with pillows, which will cause whiplash. I don't know if you've been hit really hard with a pillow, but it still hurts. He would hit me with like house shoes and stuff. He was learning how to not leave marks on my face. He was choking me much more. He would like rip me out of the shower and throw me to the ground when he would get angry at me. He'd have me, even when I was like just recently pregnant, he would just scream at me for hours and keep me sleep deprived until like 3 a.m, where I wasn't even understanding the words that were coming out of his mouth because my brain would just start shutting down. He'd have me so upset that I would be throwing up in the bathroom, and then he would just walk away and go to bed, go to sleep. And I would just be sitting on the bathroom floor, like praying for somebody to save me. And like at that time, I really believed in God, and I would just pray and be like, when are you going to get me out of this? When is he going to get his karma? And yeah, and just thinking like, man, I'm going to lose this baby. So I was really worried about losing the baby and just worried about, you know, him purposely making me. And so I left him again. And this time I went to my neighbor who, she was living next door to us, but she had just moved down the road. And she let me stay with her. I remember actually the incident that I left was, so he kicked me out. Technically, like he's like, you know, if you want to go, here's the keys. He's dangling them in the doorway. He's throwing my shoes at me. And I'm terrified to leave because I know this game. I know he's just going to slam me. And sure enough, he did. And I had this big giant wedding or engagement ring that he had got. And I remember him, like, he slammed me to the ground and then picked me up. And he's like 3 times my size, almost 3 times my size. I'm 5 foot. He's 6'2", almost 300 pounds. And so I'm pregnant, and he's just whipping me around like a rag doll. He's got me slammed up against the door, and he's choking me so hard, and I'm trying to get my fingers in between his hands so that I can breathe. And I took my ring, and it scratched my face. And so I'm bleeding, and he throws me out down the steps and tells me to get out. And so I just take off. I get in my car, and I head to the only person that I knew, which was my neighbor who had befriended me, was extremely sweet to me. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't know what to do. I went to her house, and I walk up, and she sees me, and she's like, oh my God, because I'm bleeding. And she rushes me in her house, and she helps me, and she tells me I can stay as long as I need. And I was able to stay away from him for 6 weeks that time, which felt like a lifetime. Being pregnant, and I remember him telling me, because I left, get rid of the baby. If you don't, I will. You know, and so that kept me away longer, I think, too. And we were still texting, though. I was trying to ignore him, but still texting. He was sending flowers to my work. He would go back and forth. So he'd get really manic and just lose his shit. And then he would come down and be like, you know, I love you. I want to be together. You have we're married. You're my wife. You have my baby, you know, in your belly. Like, you can't leave me. He was right. I had nowhere to go. I was staying at my friend's, but I wasn't getting it anywhere. I had nothing. And he made sure he shut off my phone, so I had to get a burner phone. And then when he realized I wasn't coming back, he would turn on my phone and reach out to me. And in the moment of desperation, I went back to him because he said all the right things. He got me in that moment where he was able to, I was super vulnerable and he was able to just kind of hoover me back. And after 6 weeks of being free from him, I went back. And we didn't move this time. Instead, he said, we'll repaint the house and it'll be a new scenery and we'll start over again from there. And I'll go back to counseling. And I thought I was doing the right thing because I remember like just slowly like having him go to counseling. He was going to counseling while I was separated. We were meeting up, but in safe places. I wasn't going back to the house. I wasn't alone with him. In my head, I was like, oh, we're getting somewhere. This is progress. He really does care about me. He's going to therapy. He is going to do better. And he did great. He did all the things that he knew he needed to do to get me back. And then I was back. And then it just started all over again. We ended up moving again, but this time it was because the landlord was selling. So we needed to move and we went to Wyndham, Maine. The other thing I remember in that home was there was some red flags surrounding him with my daughter, my 7-year-old at the time. She no longer wanted to go on rides with him. And there was a moment where we were going to bed and they both had gone up to bed before me, minutes before me. It was minutes. And I walked up the stairs and I went into her room to give her, a kiss goodnight. She wasn't in there. So I was like, that's weird. So I went to my room and she's sitting in bed with my husband and he has his shirt off. They were in there for, I swear, 2 minutes. She went right up ahead of me. And so I'm searching her face and she seems fine, but it was a red flag. And I was like, what's going on? Oh, well, she just wanted to hang out with me until you came up. So I was like, okay. And my daughter just has a really good poker face. I brushed it off. I was like, yeah, everything seems fine. They're just close, He's a good step. So I sent her to her room. And I think there were a couple of those incidences. One where she was sitting on his lap one time, but nothing. He was doing it right in front of me, where he had her sit on his lap, and they were doing something together. And now looking back, I realized that is a red flag. But then it didn't seem like it. She was little. He was being a stepdad. So a couple of those incidents happened in that home. It stopped for a while. We moved to Wyndham, and I didn't notice up until before I had him removed. So I already had our first. I was pregnant with our second. I had just opened a daycare center. I was doing really well for myself. And we weren't doing well. I was putting all my energy into my daycare center and my girls, and I was still being expected to be like this perfect wife, doing, all the house cleaning, taking care of the kids, cooking, doing all my wifely duties. I couldn't go 2 nights without being intimate with him or he would freak out. My youngest daughter, I skipped past that part, but so the daughter that I was pregnant with in this home, I did not want to get pregnant again. He agreed. He asked me after 6 months, after we had our first daughter, he wanted another daughter, but his standards for me were so extremely high and I was just in a shell of myself at that point. But I stood up and I was like, no, I don't want another child right now. Things aren't great. And he agreed with me. But when he got his vasectomy, we had agreed that there was no birth control. It was just like the pull out. And so he agreed with that. And, it was shortly after that we were being intimate and he held me down and he finished and then apologized after, was like, I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. And like, I know he did that shit on purpose. That's the only reason he agreed. He had already had that planned out. And within 2 weeks, I was pregnant again with our second daughter. Fast forward to the home in Wyndham. I'm pregnant, very pregnant, 8 months pregnant. We're not doing very well. I go to work. He's texting me that you're boring, you're boring. You never want to do anything. I don't even want to be with you. I was like, okay, fine. Let's just separate. And I was trying to keep very calm through text and trying to be very respectful and, amicable. And I was like, we could do this. We could separate and we could share custody of the kids and we can make this work. You don't have to be with me. And by the time I got home, this went on all day long. By the time I got home, I was sitting on the floor with my daughter. He comes in the door and is just immediately, he was manic at that point looking back. He came behind me and took my hair and yanked it really hard and then punched me like in my ear, just like this, hit me really hard and like rung my bell. My ear was ringing. I was dizzy. My 1-year-old is standing right next to me screaming. And I go to grab her and he snatches her really quickly from me. And I was like, it's okay, baby. You're okay. Um, Man, I had a really hard time this time around. Yeah. So once again, he's directing me. Get up, go upstairs. I got up. I went upstairs. I followed him upstairs. He put my daughter in her room in her crib, closed the door, had me go in our room, and the window was open, and neither of us knew it. I know that he is about to really hurt me. I'm extinguish him not to. He walks to the closet and he grabs his belt. He comes at me, tells me, lay on the bed with your head hanging over the edge. I was like, please, I don't, don't do this. Like, I won't leave you. I love you. I'll stay with you. We don't have to get divorced. He's like, nope, it's too late. And he comes over and he gets the belt around my neck, and I immediately get my arm up through it, and I'm pleading. I'm like, Ron, please don't do this. You are going to kill our daughter. I don't care. It's too late. He gets my arm out and pulls the belt really tight, and I get like this tunnel vision, and I'm just laying there waiting to die, basically. And I think about my older kids, and I say goodbye to them in my head. And I'm like, all right, this is it. I knew this was going to happen. This is why I wrote the letter and I put it in my desk at work, that if anything ever happened to me, it was him. If I ever go missing, he used to threaten that he would murder me and bury me in the mountains and nobody would find me. And I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't think it would happen when I was pregnant. And so I just said goodbye and let go. And he let go. He let go of the belt. And I remember being so thankful and was like, I love you. I won't do these things. I won't upset you anymore. I'll stay with you. And as I'm taking the belt off and I'm trying to put space in between us, he walks around the bed and grabs the 45 from underneath the bed that he had asked me to get in my name. And I had begged him. I didn't want to get the gun, and I begged him. I said, please, if I get this, don't use it on me. I had to beg my husband not to use my gun on me. And sure enough, he pulled it out and he started loading it bullet by bullet. And I am pleading. But at this point, my brain is shutting down. I am just starting to completely shut down. I'm having like this out of body experience and I'm feeling very numb, but I'm still begging him. And he loads it and he cocks it and he looks out the window, backs up to the window and looks out, and he's like, the police are here. And I think, someone called them because somebody heard me pleading, and he's like, if they knock, I am going to shoot you, the baby, and then myself. And I was like, you don't have to do this. I was like, we can stop right now. You don't have to do this. It's too late. If the cops come, they'll see you. Your face is beat red. I've got probably marks all over my neck. I was like, it's okay. I'll get in the shower. I'll put the water on really hot. And, when they come in and I get out and they ask, I can just say it's from the water. I was doing saying everything I possibly could to save my life in that moment. And then I just had to wait. And I watched him watch the window. And then the police left. And then he came up. He walked up very close to me with the gun. And he said, if you ever try to leave me again, I will kill you. And that was it. I had decided at that moment that I was never going to try to leave him. I was never going to talk about it again. And then he put the gun away and pretended like everything's fine and asked me what was for dinner and just went on carrying on. And I immediately went in and got my baby and just held my baby, just did whatever I had to do to not upset him for the rest of the night. But the way he could just switch and act like everything was fine, I will never understand. So yeah, that was the last time I ever tried to leave him. Last time I ever talked about it. Things did not get better. I tried to stay out of his way as much as I could. I had our second daughter, and then he just started to discard me, didn't really pay attention to me, didn't make eye contact with me. I just became the housemaid. I cleaned every little thing. I would if there was something dropped on the floor, crumbs on the floor, I would get down on my knees and clean it in front of him. And like I was just gone. Whoever I was completely gone at that point. And I was just waiting to die, really. And then the red flags started coming up with my daughter again, like a few nights before everything went down. We would have this routine where we would go up with our daughters and lay down at really early, 6 o'clock. We'd go up together, lay down with them. They would go to bed. and then we go to bed. But then all of a sudden, he wanted me to go upstairs first, and he wanted me to take the CBD oil that he had gotten, which I didn't do, but that was a flag. And there's 2 nights of it where I would go up first, and he would take forever. I'm like, hey, are you coming up? And one night he didn't. He was down there for like a half an hour, and my daughter happened to be there. She hadn't gone down to the basement yet. So I walk down the stairs. My daughter's on one end of the couch, and he is sitting in the chair next to the couch. And I look at my daughter. I'm always searching her face. I looked at my daughter, and her face is flushed, but she's giggly. And I'm like, what's going on? So I go over there. I'm like, it's time for you to go to bed. I go over to her, and I give her a kiss, and I can smell alcohol on her breath. And immediately I knew that he'd given her alcohol. I sent her down to bed. She was fine. She wasn't like stumbling or drunk or anything, but she had drank some. And then I went upstairs. I was terrified to say anything, but once we got upstairs, I couldn't not say something. So I was like, did you give her alcohol? And he said, yeah, she seemed stressed. So I just wanted, I gave her just a tiny bit to help relax her. And I remember being like, please don't ever do that again. And he's like, yeah, fine, whatever. And that was the end of the conversation. I believe it was the next night or the next day, he had come up with the idea to take her to get her hair cut. And I said, hey, I haven't had much time with her because of the babies. Maybe you could stay with the babies and I could take her to go do her hair and, give me a chance to bond with her. He did not want me to go anywhere alone with her. He said, nope, we'll all go together. We went together. She got her hair done, super cute. On the way home, he called and ordered wings from Wingstop or whatever down the street. It was like 2 minutes down the street. I was like, great, we got dinner figured out. We get home, everybody gets out of the car. I grab the babies because it was always my job to grab the babies. And as I'm walking in the door, expecting my daughter, who is 9 now, my 9-year-old daughter, to follow me in, I look back and he's taking off with her. Didn't say anything to me about it, just told her to get in. He goes, I was like, oh, he'll be back in 5 minutes. 20 minutes went by and started rolling in, and I knew something was wrong. All my flags were raised. All these bells were going off. I look for my daughter to walk in the door and again search her face, and it's just this complete poker face. And I was like, what took so long? Oh, there was a line. It was so busy. We were just having to wait that whole time. And in my head, I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I was like, okay. And I went on with my day. We had dinner. And then he goes upstairs with our girls, which was unusual. And I was getting ready to head up. And then my 9-year-old comes over to me and she says, Mom, she holds her hands together in front of her. And she goes, there's something I have to tell you. She's like, but I can't tell you right now. And I knew, like, immediately. I have so much guilt for not seeing what was right in front of my face. And so focused on just trying to stay alive myself that I missed so much. But I looked at her and I said, I knew what she was going to tell me. And I said, nope, you're going to tell me right now. He was upstairs. I could hear him upstairs. And she goes, Ron kissed me. And this was on the way to the wings place. And held my hand and kissed me and told me that I was his woman and not to tell. She's like, I was really scared. She's like, I just wanted to stop. I found out later that there were other things that he was doing. But in that moment, she was scared and was so brave. And as she's telling me this, I can hear him getting ready to come down the stairs. And I remember just looking at her and I said, I love you. I believe you. Do you trust me? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, I'm going to take care of this, but right now, and she's crying. And I knew that if he saw, then we were all goners. And I was like, I need you to go downstairs right now. Go to your room and stay down there and don't come back up for the rest of the night. So I had to send her crying. I couldn't even comfort her down to her room. And no sooner than I had closed that door was he rounding the corner. And I had to just pretend like I didn't just hear what I heard. And immediately I'm thinking in my head, like, what am I going to do here? I cannot call the cops right now. He will know. None of us may survive this. So I decided that I was going to wait and call the police first thing in the morning when he went to work. But in the meantime, I had to pretend like everything was fine. And he was always, like, looking back, I know now, he was always searching me to see if I knew. And I had to pretend like everything was fine. I had to perform my wifely duties because if not, something would have come up. And the rage that I feel even thinking about that I remember after him immediately going to sleep and me laying there thinking all I need to do is just pull out the 45. It was under the bed. I was like, I can just grab it and just fix everything right now. And the only thing that kept me from doing that is I had a 7 months, a 1-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 12-year-old. They would lose me. And two of them would lose both of their parents. And I just laid awake all night long telling myself that in the morning, it'll be over in the morning. And I didn't realize as I was laying there not getting one wink of sleep that it was snowing outside. And he worked construction. So I woke up and we had gotten a blizzard and he took the day off and I could not call the cops. So I had to think quick and I got my daughter for a second aside. I pulled her aside and I said, stay near me. I don't want you anywhere alone with him. Just stay by my side all day long. I promise you I'm going to take care of this in the morning. She understood at that point where I was coming from. And all day long, I had to just pretend. And it was a very eerie feeling all day. I think that he started to figure it out because he started making comments. He found reasons to make comments. Like we were watching this movie with this really terrible stepdad. And I remember him being like, aren't you guys so lucky that you have such a great stepdad? And then searching all of our faces. My son still had no idea what was going on, but my daughter and I were both having to pretend. And I remember him saying at one point, I was not able to keep a poker face. And I guess I was scowling at him. And I remember him looking at me being like, what's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? And I had to just be like, oh, just in deep thought or something. I don't know what excuse I gave him, but I remember, and looking back, I feel like he started to figure it out. So we got through the day. We got through the night. The next morning, he left for work and I called the police. They gave me a number for a DV advocate and sexual assault advocate and CPS. I got a hold of them. They were like, okay, you need to come in immediately so your daughter can do a forensic interview. I brought my kids in. They all interviewed. DHS or CPS immediately substantiated my daughter's claims. Then it was about getting a protection, no contact order. So this was March 25th of 2020. So right immediately when COVID was like just starting, the police didn't want to come in my house. They didn't want me at the station. They came and put a no contact order on the hood of their car, had me sign it so they could take it to the judge. And throughout this whole day, he is texting me even more than usual, telling me, oh, I love you. How are you doing? How are things? Like he knew. And I was like, but still playing my part. Like, yeah, I love you too. Can't wait to see you. Looking forward to you coming home, blah, blah, blah. They got me a hotel for my kids to get us out of the house because I didn't know if the emergency no contact order would go through. And it didn't until I got home from work and he's still texting me, but I was no longer there and I was done. I was completely done. Whatever fear I had of this man was gone and it was completely replaced by this immense amount of rage. When I was told this no contact order went through, I was done pretending. He was texting me, why aren't you home? Because he had basically told me I couldn't leave the home. I couldn't ram the roads with the kids. He had me shut down my daycare center. So I was literally just stuck in my house. So for me to not be there when he got home from work was not something that happened. So he texted me, well, why aren't you home? I'm going to start dinner. Are you just out shopping with the kids? Just really searching. And I just was like, I texted him and said, I know what you did. And he came, and I was like, I know what you did to her. And he came up with, oh, you know that we did this something stupid. And, he's trying to like paint this picture, pretending like he didn't know. And I was like, no, I know. She told me everything. I know what you did. You're going to have a no contact order here shortly. And I want you to not contact me until all this is over. And the reason I said that is because in my mind, I didn't know if I was still going to have to parent with him and had no idea how that was going to play out. So a part of me was still trying to, explain to him, like, how am I not going to believe my daughter? I have to believe my daughter over you as a parent. It has to be this way. And he's like, well, you're not going to bring her home to confront me? And I'm thinking to myself, like, she's 9. She's 9 years old. And to confront her about that, like, whoa, what he thought, I don't know. I'm so glad that he wasn't able to talk me into it because, again, it might have just been over for all of us if I had gone back to that house with him. And I said, no, I'm not going to bring my 9-year-old back for you to confront her about something you've done to her. Please stop contacting me. And the police came and they had him removed. They did not arrest him. They just removed him. He lawyered up. He pled the fifth with CPS. He refused to interview with them. I filed for divorce, or one of us did. I don't know. That doesn't matter either way. Divorce was filed. I think he did it actually does matter because I think he did it to show like, oh, she said this, but she didn't even file for divorce. But I was doing what my attorneys were telling me to do. He was trying to paint this picture to everybody else. After I had him removed, I thought that I was safe, but he started stalking me. He was violating the no contact order, but the police weren't doing anything about it. He was taking pictures of me from the wood line across from our backyard. Like, I had somebody move in with me, the neighbor that let me stay with her. She just happened to need a place to stay after I had him removed, and it worked out. And I said, come live with me. I'll feel safer. You'll have a roof over your head. And she moved in with me. And I remember being out on the back deck with her. It was a raised back deck, and seeing flashes of light in the woods, where now I know that it was him taking pictures. I have him caught on camera in that area. That's on my TikTok. He sugared my tank in my van. This was when I had the no contact order. He has a felony. He's wanted out of Maine for that right now because he fled the state. He was taking pictures of me in my house. I still don't know how, but I had somebody send a picture of me with somebody that he had taken and had sent to them. He was immediately started dating someone after I had him removed who went with him to do these things, and afterwards told me that at one point he was at my home underneath my raised deck, standing under there while I was standing on the deck talking. I never even knew that he was that close to me. Then came the murder plot, which was extremely detailed. That this girl that he dated, she ended up going to the police and telling the police that he plotted to murder me by bumping into my car, which he had already done before, waiting for me to get out, snatching me, hog tying me. He had two other people that were supposedly involved in this plot, that owned a boat. He was going to take me out on the boat. He was going to hit me with a weed whacker, bamboo sticks, pour poison down my throat, cut my limbs off, spray foam in every orifice of my body, and then stuff me in a lobster trap and sink me to the bottom of the ocean. This was a plot that somebody that I loved with every bit of me had to do away with me. That will cause trust issues. I got really scared. I couldn't sit on my couch. I couldn't sit by the windows. I couldn't leave my house. I just sat on my floor. And then another person went to the police because he confided in somebody else about the same plot. And then the DV advocates started realizing that I was not safe where I was. They installed a Vardo alarm. The police installed a Vardo alarm. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it looks like this, I don't know, cable box with an antenna, and it has a button that you push, and all the cops in the surrounding area come when you push that button. But when the second person went to the police about it, the DV advocates were like, "You're just not safe enough here." And they removed us from our home, and I lived in a shelter and hotels for almost a year trying to get safe from this man. He then eventually fled. I was able to strip him of his parental rights. Thank God I had the best lawyers. But not until after he had tried to extort me by saying he would sign away his rights if I gave him $10,000. And he had an attorney actually contact my attorney saying that. So just not very bright, but my attorney explained to him that was extortion. And from that point on, we quickly were able to get his rights stripped. I was able to divorce him. And then he fled. So he still has that warrant. And this is why I'm still on TikTok telling my story, because there are other victims after me. There was one that he took $10,000 from, and the same one that he went with him to stalk me. After that, he ended up dating a mutual friend of ours who he brutalized and almost strangled to death when they were on vacation in Port St. Lucie, Florida. He took that to trial, and the justice system failed her, and he was found innocent. And the documents and the police statement are horrific on that. I actually was able to sue him for what he did to me. He did not get charged criminally. The two DAs in both counties where he essayed my daughter refused to move forward with the case because it was his word against my daughter's, because I didn't see anything and she was only 9 and they didn't want to put her through more trauma. So they let it go. Because they said, well, he doesn't have rights. You have the no contact order, so he can't come around you anyways. And that was justifying. And I think COVID played a part in that too. But my attorneys were amazing. And they said, if we can't get him criminally, we'll get him civilly. And I sued him for $250,000 for torture. And I was able to win that lawsuit. I'm never going to see that money, but he will never own anything in his name, or it will come to me. And I'm okay with that. And also the validation I got from the judge, who, made it very clear that what he learned about my situation was horrific, and that was validating for me. And so I would happily have just moved on with my life, never talking about this man again, but I can't, because there are other victims who find me, their families find me, their friends find me. One of them, a victim, a girl he was dating, had a daughter whose dad was involved in the picture still, thought that he was SAing his daughter. And the guardian ad litem in that case found me and Ron's first survivor, his first ex-wife, and asked us for information, and I forwarded the substantiation letter for SA on my daughter, and they were able to get a no contact order for that little girl against him and keep him away from her. And this is what we do. Leslie, the first wife, and she was the only one I had for a while, and she helped me through after I had him removed, and now we help these other victims. And there is another victim currently who is trying to divorce him. This will be his third ex-wife. They have court here shortly. She got a no contact order on him. She tried to leave him once when her family reached out and found me, and we sent all the information because I have all the receipts. We sent all the information to the family. They showed her. She was able to get away for a little bit, but then her dad died, and he was right there with open arms, hoovered her back in. She was able to finally get away from him. I believe it was this past summer when she was at the hospital with her daughter, who was getting ready to have a baby, and he wanted her to leave the hospital and come home to him. And she wanted to stay. So he showed up with a gun and pointed it out the window of his truck at her in the parking lot and told her to get in. She ran for her life. There were staff there that saw it. He was caught on his own Ring camera. I have all that video footage I've posted to TikTok of him heading to commit the crime, coming back with the gun. He served 3 months in jail for that. But she was able to get away from him, has not gone back to him, has a no contact order against him. He's getting ready. They have a divorce hearing here shortly on the 8th. But he violated the no contact order on her by following her in his vehicle and pulling up alongside of her and rolling down the window and sticking out his fingers, pretending to shoot her, and then drove away. The police have been looking for him for the last 2 weeks. They cannot find him. Guessing he's not going to show up at the hearing, but I'm telling my story and trying to tell everybody who Ronald Lee Hopkins is, because he is a monster and somebody is going to die. At some point, one of the victims will not be a survivor, and I don't know what else to do other than to just keep talking and telling my story and sharing it with the world and hoping that a big creator on TikTok takes my story and helps me push it out there. Until then, I appreciate so much that you have me on your podcast, being able to tell my story, and I hope that it reaches people, because he's everyone's problem. Don't know where he is. His MO is to meet people online, move to their state, isolate them from friends and family, and then abuse them, and or take their money and leave them high and dry. And every time a victim comes to me looking for help, I absolutely want to help them, but I'm reliving my trauma. And it just feels like this never-ending situation. And the justice system is broken, and it fails because it's set up to protect the abusers and not the victims. And I'm so tired of him just being able to get away with everything he does. And I don't know how else to stop it than to just keep telling my story and hoping that enough people will hear me.
Can you share his name again, his age, and what location he may be in?
Ronald Lee Hopkins. He's 50 years old. The last we knew, he was living in Beckley, West Virginia, but he's absolutely hiding out from the police right now. And he could be in Tennessee. He could be in Virginia. He literally could be anywhere. He looks for his next victim online, and then he moves to where they are and he starts over. He burns all his bridges, so he has nothing holding him down. He could be in any state, really.
Do you have any advice for anybody that may be listening that may find themselves in the beginning of a relationship like this?
Yeah, set boundaries. That's something I didn't have. I didn't have a support system or any real healthy relationships to base, any of my relationships on. So I had no boundaries. I didn't even know what boundaries were. If somebody is moving really fast, that's a red flag. If you set a boundary of someone like, not like, he would message me and call me constantly throughout the day and keep me on the phone constantly. And I painted that red flag as, oh, he loves me. He just can't stand to be away from me. That's not it. He was isolating me. He was keeping me from hanging out with other people, talking to other people. So set that boundaries. Can you give me some space between these hours? I'm going to go hang out with my friends, or I'm going to go see my family. And if they can't respect that, if they're still texting, if they're still calling, if they get angry, if they want to know where you are, those are red flags. That is somebody who's trying to isolate you. And it's not a good situation. And that's probably one of the biggest red flags that I missed.
Can you share your TikTok handle once again for the listeners so they know where to find you?
ToxicLove_2022.
Thank you so much for coming on and telling your story. I know that it is incredibly difficult for you to relive these experiences. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, there are resources available. The domestic violence hotline is 1-800-799-7233. If you want more of me and my pod, F That Pod on Patreon. For every single episode, I archive a lot of my old episodes, so you get every single episode there. I release them early and ad-free, 0 ads. If you also liked what you heard, please like, review, subscribe. You can find me on all social media at FThatPod except for Instagram, FThat_pod. I'm on YouTube, FThatPod, and the website is fthatpod.com. Love you, bye.